Clay is easily bent, molded, and shaped by a potter before being refined in fire where it's hardened. Molded out of clay ourselves, God formed man of the dust of the ground. We are pottery, and God is the divine potter. Through his mercy and grace, he is able to reshape, remold, rebuild, and redeem us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clay. This is a space for people to share their stories of how God has touched and transformed their lives with his goodness. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. So today we have with us our guest, Chris, and Chris is going to share with us his testimony of hardship and overcoming in life and ministry. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me on today. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. So can you just start by giving us a little bit of background about just like your childhood? Did you grow up in church? What was that like?
Yeah, for sure. We grew up, my family was I don't know how detailed you want to get into, but we were one of the big denominations of the Christian world that was a little bit more religious and conservative.
Right.
I would say a little bit more legalistic, probably leaned pretty heavy on the legalistic side.
Gotcha.
And we were that was our whole life. My family and my wife's family, we went to church together. So we grew up in that environment, very much like no rated R movies, no secular music, no school dances, wear a suit to church on the weekends, no alcohol or tobacco. There's just a lot of rules and legalistic stuff in there. So grew up in that environment our whole life, going to that same church from birth until we got married almost. So that's kind of where all my mindset for religion and what I've learned over the last 20 years of being out of that, not just religion, but in marriage and child raising and, outreach and ministry and all these kind of things that definitely put like a pair of blinders or colored glasses on how I looked at the world based on that upbringing. So
Right.
it was very much closed and strict.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that like you grew up hearing about Jesus and kind of knowing that basic message of salvation, but at the same time, it was sort of like a very religious perspective and like not the relationship aspect.
Yeah. And I think as a kid, like a young kid, that side of it definitely helps you in learning about the Bible and learning about the things of the Bible. And, we had memorized all the books of the Bible in order, and we had to do Bible quiz and all that kind of stuff. So I think there was a great educational aspect to it.
Sure.
But as soon as I got to the teenage years, it all kind of just was not interesting at all.
Right. It was just like information.
Yeah, for sure. And I would look back on we had a fairly large size church that there was not many teenagers who didn't fall away and rebel and get into stuff that they shouldn't have done once we got to our teenage years. We had a pretty wide range of teens that did not follow in that and didn't stay in church because it just wasn't anything past that legalism and that information. There was no relationship necessarily, and everything about was just following these rules. Yeah. So that definitely was true for me and my sisters, that we all went through that phase of wasn't something we were interested in, and very easy to rebel against those rules and those laws that were laid out there. I can remember, I think I was 13 maybe or 14, and went to a friend's house, and he was this was in the 90s, so there was like a CD company that would mail you CDs every month. It was like a subscription for CDs.
Yeah.
And he got Green Day CD and Alanis Morissette CD, and those were the first two like non-Christian music I had ever listened to in my life.
Oh, wow.
I was like, well, this is awesome. I was like, oh, it's so good. Those things become very enticing whenever your life has been ran by a list of rules and stuff that you can't do or whatever. And it just led into those teenage years of looking for and finding other stuff that was more exciting and interesting than God or church.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. So what kind of things did you encounter like that started to make life like just like turbulent or just those hardships that you have referred to before?
Yeah, and went through my teenage years and got into weird stuff. Like I never got into drugs really. I think I just never thought those looked enticing or sounded enticing, but
Yeah.
drinking and really bad like Marilyn Manson type music and uh, just kind of was a goth kid and all this kind of stuff in my later teenage years, and um, ended up getting like radically saved when I was 17, and God kind of miraculously just peeled those things off. Like there's definitely times whenever something happens and it takes a lifetime of struggling. It takes years of like, hey, I want to quit smoking. But that night, like I stopped everything. I didn't drink anymore. I didn't cuss anymore. I didn't, like, me and my friend went and took all of our gangster rap CDs and our death metal and burned them, put them in a fire. And
Oh, wow.
it's very much like a radical
Yeah.
salvation experience.
Yeah.
That was when I was 17.
Yeah, and then instantly like delivered from those
Yeah,
things. That's
different
pretty
person. It was a
awesome.
deliverance for sure. A brand new person that
Wow.
night. It was at like we used to call them revivals, and it
Yeah.
was essentially just a guest speaker that would come in, but they would go Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday, and it'd be like a whole week. Every night you'd go to church and sit there and listen to this guy preach. And one of those nights, I don't even know why, I was definitely not a Christian and definitely wasn't living that way, but I just felt compelled to go up and give my life to God and ask for forgiveness for everything I was doing. Very much out of the norm, what I would have never expected, and changed
Wow.
my life that night. And that was 1999. So it's been almost 25 years, and I still remember that, and I still carry that with me. But I had to go through a bunch of stuff after that to shape me into who I think that I am now, or that I'd like to be now. Especially as a new Christian, sometimes you think, well, since I'm now in the family of God, all my problems are going to end, or hey, everything's going to go well for me. And that was
Wrong.
not the case. That was definitely
Right.
not the case. Um, while that was going on, my family was going through a really hard time. My mom and dad were splitting up,
Mm.
and that was very hard. Like we grew up in this vastly legalistic religious church where that kind of stuff wasn't even talked about, much less that you ever saw that or experienced that.
Right.
And that got super, super nasty and weird. And I was, 16, 17, 18 years old as that was happening. And that kind of really hurt me. It hurt my,
Yeah.
under my foundation, my view of family, all that kind of stuff. Very much challenged my mind and my thinking in those. And then it went downhill real quick. And my dad ended up making some real bad decisions and ended up in prison. So I was 18, and I was actually in basic training in the Army. I joined the Army a few months after high school. I was in basic training, and they pulled me in, and my mom was there, and I think one of my sisters and my girlfriend, who's been my wife for that 20 past years, we're still together. They were there, and I said, "Hey, just need to let you know your dad got arrested, and it looks like he's going to be going to prison." Rock your world, going from there was
Absolutely.
never even any alcohol in our house. I never even saw anything to, oh man, like our family's definitely at this point broken,
Yeah.
fractured, all those
Falling
kinds of
apart.
things. So it was, and I was in an isolated place.
Yeah.
I remember like sneaking out of the barracks, and I'd go find like an empty room or a place where there's no other people around, and I would just like curl up in a ball and just cry.
Oh.
and just like pray and God, why are you letting this happen? And I don't have anybody to talk to. There's no one here that cares. And it was like just a real bad few months of being stuck in basic training while that was going on.
Yeah, that's a terrible place to find out horrible information like that, because you're not surrounded by loved ones, you're not surrounded by friends, and in fact, you're in very challenging, purposely, intentionally challenging circumstances. So to have to carry that weight of your family kind of falling apart while simultaneously going through basic training, that definitely sounds like a difficult season for sure.
Yeah, and the drill sergeants, they all pulled me into their office and they said, hey, we need to make sure that you're focused on your training and not focused on your family. So we're going to make your life miserable.
Oh my gosh.
So that you don't have any time to think about your family. And so they essentially hazed and abused me for the whole 4 months to try to keep me from thinking about my family or anything. Yeah. They definitely made my life hard so that I could get through basic. I mean, I think their ultimate goal was I wouldn't drop out or try to leave or whatever. So that was all, very traumatic experience. I was 18 at the time. That's, still very young. So I think those things, like you have a relationship with God, you give your life to God, doesn't immediately mean that you're going to have roses and rainbows the rest of your life. Like that was very young going through that experience and having to figure out, what my life looks like, what our family's life looks like and everything. But at the same time, it taught me at 18 years old how to lean on God, how to rely on God whenever I'm struggling or whenever things are hard. Right. Even though I don't understand, even though I don't know what's going on, even though I don't know what the outcome is going to be, that I still have to lean on Him and rely on Him to get me through those hard times. So it was a good life lesson in my relationship with God for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you got saved and you went like almost immediately into a really, really intense trial and just like our difficult season. And then also just to kind of expand on it just a little bit, your dad, wasn't just going to prison for like a very short time. He was going to go long term, correct?
Hey, Clay Nation, Jessica here, and I've got some exciting news for you. Now you can show off your love for Clay Podcast with our brand new merchandise collection. From cozy hoodies that wrap you in comfort during your podcast sessions to stylish mugs that hold your favorite beverage while you tune in, we've got something for everyone. And that's not all. Our exclusive t-shirts feature the inspiring Bible verse Isaiah 64:8 that'll keep you motivated throughout your day. But wait, there's more. By purchasing our merchandise, you're just not getting cool items, you're also supporting Clay Podcast. Your love and enthusiasm keep us going. And now you can take a piece of the podcast with you wherever you go. So what are you waiting for? Head over to our website at www.claypodcastnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook at Clay Podcast and also on Instagram at Clay_podcast to check out the full collection and grab your favorites today. And always, thank you for being a part of our podcast journey and now our merchandise family. Remember, every purchase is a step towards more amazing podcast content coming your way. Stay tuned and God bless.
Yeah, he's actually still in prison. So that was 2000. So it's been over 20 years that he's been in.
Yeah, I just wanted people to understand the gravity of the situation.
And that's been 20 years, 22 years, 23 years, geez, man, of praying. Like every night we tuck our kids into bed and they say a prayer that he will come home soon and God will keep him safe and taking them to visit him. And that's not, there's not been like hey, there's a phone call, your dad's getting out of prison early, it's a miracle. No, it's been 23 years of struggle and frustration and the whole just keep praying for your miracle, just keep praying, believing that you wear down over time with your faith, with your hope. And you like, it's a constant getting recharged or refreshed with the Holy Spirit. All right, I can't let my faith die in this. I can't let my hope go out in this.
Right.
That somewhere in this, God has a plan. Somewhere in this, God is working something.
Yes.
And I don't know, and I can't predict the future, but I just have to keep my faith as strong as I can. And that's a roller coaster. It goes up and down. Like, there's definitely, I would not tell anybody listening to this that it's been 23 years where I've just been riding high and my faith is strong. There's definitely times whenever I get super down and frustrated and you know, depressed about situations, and but you gotta always let that ride back up. You can't always just stay down at the bottom.
Yeah. We talked with a former guest on here. She was like waiting on healing for years and years, and she had this like a really debilitating issue. And we talked about how like when God does not just show up with that miracle, and it sometimes it like takes a really, really long time, and it's because He's cultivating endurance in us, and He's cultivating character in us, and it's like that really hard refining process that He has us walk through for whatever reason, maybe unknown to us, but we can hold on to that promise that He uses all things for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So at the end of the day, the fact that you're able to even just rest in that promise, to help hold you, or to help you hold on through this whole thing. Okay. So you said that whole experience kind of helped formed you or grew you up a little bit. Would you say that kind of has like helped you press into God? Like, how has that hardship or any other hardships? I know you mentioned, you were in the Army, and I know you've deployed. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Just kind of the challenges that you've faced during those times?
Yeah, for sure. I was in Iraq in 2007. Seems so long ago, but 2007. But I also had a couple other times where the Army separated me from my family and sent me around different places. Like the first 6 years that my wife and I were married, I was gone 3 years during the early days of the war there.
Wow.
So that definitely,
Is it 3 years?
the military's, yeah,
Wow.
3 years, out of that first 6 years. The military is really good, and especially like during times of war, of not caring about you or your family. They're concerned about the mission and what the military is supposed to do. So that definitely a whole new level of my wife and I working through all that and trying to stay connected, and felt like and especially before smartphones and really even super access to cell phones, trying to talk and that we'd go weeks without being able, like, it was a very difficult time to be a young married person, not to mention all the stuff, the stress that the military puts on you. Then going to Iraq in 2007, went to really, really bad war stuff, like just daily fighting and constant risk of death. And, at the time is super exciting. I think people who are in those kind of fields, that's exciting. I really enjoyed to a certain extent that experience, and wanted to be there and everything. But then you come home from that, and I just thought I was happy to be home. Stephanie, my wife, she within just the first 2 or 3 months, she really was noticing that there were some things wrong, and she would say like, "Hey, I think something's wrong. I think you're struggling, or you might be injured or something. I think you need to get some help." And I would kind of blow it off. And I was in a really dark place. Like, there's not a lot of light in a combat situation, not just with the death and destruction and the killing, but with being surrounded by people who, like I think I was like one of two people who would call themselves a Christian in my platoon. that you're just around darkness all the time, and then you're constantly going and doing stuff. That I came back from there, and I learned after all this that I was just in a very dark place. I'd say probably maybe the darkest place of my life, where you don't even think about God, you don't even think about the human condition or your soul or anything like that. That's just one of those things that gets pushed down pretty quickly. But I also was dealing with all the war stuff, and so my wife would, hey, I think you're really struggling with some anger issues, or man, you're really um, forgetful. I feel like you can't remember anything, and she would poke me about it. And finally, a few months after I got home, she's like, "Hey, you need to go to the VA. I can't deal with you acting like this or being like this. You really need to go get checked out and get some help."
Right.
She definitely pushed me into that. Probably fight, kicking and screaming.
Right.
But it did cause me to go and get checked out, and find out all of the stuff that was broken and messed up, and that started a real long, dark rehabilitation process, just of the physical stuff. Like, I never even wanted to get into the emotional side of it. It was just, hey, you got blown up too many times and your brain's messed up. And so that meant going to VA all the time for speech therapy and for neurotherapy and all these appointments. And I had to drop out of college. That first semester back, I tried to go to college. I couldn't read anymore, and I was trying to hide it and just kind of push my way through. And I started falling behind, and then my wife's like, "Hey, I think there's something wrong. You need to go get checked out." And I'm like, "Yeah, you got a brain injury, man. You were in too many explosions." And so I had to, essentially drop out of school and say, "All right, I need to change my whole life.
Yeah.
What am I going to do for the rest of my life?" And that was hard. That was really hard. I was like halfway through college already and thought I knew what I was going to be doing, and having to really assess myself about, all right, what am I capable of? What do I want to do? What was something I would enjoy doing moving forward in my life? But that was a very depressing time, very hard time dealing with all that, while everything else is still going on. And I never even got into like the PTSD emotional stuff. I was totally just wanted to focus on my physical health. And it's just been recently in the last year that I've even started addressing that. And I'm going back through it all over again. 15 years later, I'm now talking to therapists and counselors and doctors and stuff, and digging up and rehashing all this combat stuff that I had kind of suppressed. And it's a lot, and life throws a lot at you, and you constantly have to be working and striving to, what's the best I can be doing, what's something I can improve on, all those things. But life gets hard, and you got kids, and you got all their stuff, and you got work, and all that stuff piles on. I think that's definitely a part in our culture where we're at, with people struggling with their mental health, me included. Throw COVID on top of all that. It's very tough and stressful and difficult and depressing, all that kind of things. But
Yeah.
I've been trying to fight through all that.
I live in such like a fast paced, busy, day. It's like, I feel like it's easy to just like shove things down, like those emotions and those hurts and wounds and stuff, because, there's a lot to get done. I feel like everyone has so much on their schedule and so much on their plate that it's kind of easy to ignore those emotional wounds and whatnot. But I heard it put one time like this: it's kind of like a beach ball that you like keep trying to shove underwater, but that beach ball is eventually going to come back up out of the water. And so it's like you have to deal with that stuff because it doesn't actually go away. So
and for me, that was COVID.
yeah.
Like, since I got back from the war, I just pumped so many things into my life that I was doing.
Yeah.
And people that, go to church near who knew me personally, see me doing all these things. I'm constantly going, and I'm involved in 50 different things.
Yeah.
Started my own nonprofit during those early years after the war and all this stuff. But all that allowed me to really just stay focused on doing stuff. And then whenever COVID hit and we were all locked in our houses and nothing was
Yeah.
going on and I couldn't do anything, that's whenever my whole world crashed, as far as my mental health. It was just like, oh man, now you actually
Right.
have to deal with this stuff. You can't
Yes.
use busyness to mask this stuff anymore. And so I've been on this mental health journey for a couple of years since COVID, trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I would never, for 15 years before that, would have considered myself someone that had mental health issues. And it's been, very difficult.
Yeah.
I routinely am trying to just like, God, what's going on? How could I be, this is not, none of this lines up with the stuff that I read in the Bible, and,
Yeah.
I didn't, and again, I think your comment before about God using all things for his purpose, like maybe this was, to give me more empathy towards people with mental health issues. I never really understood that, and didn't really think it was that big of a deal. Maybe that people were making it a bigger deal than it should be. And like now that I'm dealing with it, I'm like, holy cow! Like this is
Yeah.
why it's so hard for everybody
Right.
that deals with
Yeah,
this.
it's giving you
This is not
a greater
easy.
compassion for sure.
Yeah, it
Yes.
has, and I don't know. We read, that renewed mind, and God, all these verses that you can read about fixing your thoughts on Him and taking thoughts captive, and it's
Yes.
like, man, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's not the first thing that pops into my head whenever I
Yes.
don't want to get out of bed, or whenever I can't get motivated to do something, or I'm feeling bad. Like that,
Yeah.
this is not the easy life stuff, and it's definitely not the easy Christian life stuff,
For
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah, I've noticed in just even my own life, like healing takes so much intentionality. And that doesn't mean that God's not in it. He's totally in it. He is the author of healing, right? But it's like it's almost like we have to cooperate with him, and to do the work, to face those things, to process through it with him. And ultimately, when we walk through like inner healing journey with God, it's just increasing our intimacy with him. And I kind of like just now thinking about it, when I look back at the Psalms, and so many Psalms from David are like the lamenting Psalms of him just like pouring out his heart to God. Like he faced really difficult times of people just hunting him down and trying to kill him, and just him processing that with God, I think is just such a beautiful example for all of us.
I just really like your story because I too, through the pandemic and like so many people, experienced like a new mental health thing. Like I started getting panic attacks, and I too, like you, I didn't have empathy for people with that beforehand. I was just like, well, why can't you suck it up? Like it can't be that bad. But then whenever I started to experience them, and whenever I felt so debilitated by them, I was just like, wow, like maybe I experience this now just so I can understand people, have empathy for people. And I think so many people like that couldn't hide from things like that during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on it. And I think a lot of us have dealt with that and those new challenges. But it's so universal though. Like you go through the Bible, and there's, we could probably list off 10 different um, people from the Bible that went through. Job obviously I remember in basic training, they would put me on extra duty where I had to work in the evenings when everybody else would be off.
Mm.
And I would just sit there or stand there, like stand guard duty for 4 hours at a time or something. And I would just read the book of Job over and over again. It's like, and whatever I'm going through isn't that bad, I guess. And not that helped me necessarily not feel bad or not deal with it, but lend some perspective and a little bit of peace over it. But I mean, Abraham lamented with God over not having a son. You think Elijah is hiding in the desert, asking to die, as he didn't want to deal with the king and queen trying to kill him, and like there's just so many people throughout the Bible who struggled and dealt with hardship, and it's not something that I feel any Christian should expect to avoid. If anything else, like it's just trying to help you, equip you for dealing with those things when they come. I mean, John the Baptist sitting in prison knowing that he's going to die and is asking Jesus, where are you at? Aren't you going to help me? Like you could just go through so many people in the Bible that really had to deal with hard stuff. And, the general theme of that is that God can be there with you and can provide peace in those tough situations. You think Paul in prison, chained up and, singing worship, and I think our reaction to these hard times and stress is, "All right, God, I need more of you. I need to lean on you more. I'm not capable. I don't think I can do this on my own. I need your spirit and your peace and your joy and all the things that God offers us, and to help us get through the times, not, to have an expectation that we're going to avoid any of these hard times."
Oh, yeah. I think that if you are, as a believer, having an expectation to avoid hardships, you are severely misinformed because honestly, the goal here is to be conformed into the image of Christ, right? And in order for us to be refined in our character, you have to experience trials. I mean, he even promises that we will endure trials. And so it's just like how gold is refined in a fire. That's how God allows us to be purified. And we're not constantly in the fire. I'm not saying like, oh, you're a Christian, your life is going to be just constantly miserable. That's not what I'm saying. But the fire is necessary. It could just go for the gold to be purified. The fire is necessary for us to be conformed to the image of Christ. The fire is necessary. And I love all those stories that you referenced. And one, I think, important part to take into consideration also is the redemptive aspect and the restoration of all of it. So even when Job walked through tremendous loss, for those who aren't familiar with the story of Job, he went from having he was respected in his community. He was well known, had 10 kids, very wealthy, had servants, to losing everything. He lost his children. He lost his servants. He lost his wealth and even his reputation. People thought that he was that he had done something to earn or to deserve all this, and they would mock him and stuff. And so he literally lost everything. But in the end of that story, God restored not just what he had, but even more. He blessed him beyond what he even had before. And that doesn't mean that the trial wasn't painful in itself. Of course it was, but God, he's still in it, even when we feel like he's not. So what would you say, Chris? What would you say to somebody who is currently just in that dark place? Though when you talked about coming back from deployment and stuff, and you said it was just really, really hard because you were so used to being in that toxic environment, and you said it was just a very depressing time for you. What would you say to somebody who's currently in that state right now?
I think some of the biggest takeaways I might have had, and again, going through it all over again currently myself, is finding some really good people to surround yourself with, getting involved with a life group or support group, or a church group, or a grief share group, whatever it is that it is that you're going through. Get around some other people that aren't necessarily there to share in your despair or your stress or whatever, but that can be there to support you, help lift you up, and give you encouragement. I think talking is something that we have to learn that sometimes it's healthy to talk and get stuff out, and whether that's with a counselor or with a group or whatever, that doing things alone, trying to go at it alone, trying to solve the world's problems on your own is a very lonely place. And having some good people surround you, being in a really life-giving church is helpful for me.
Absolutely.
Those, even if it's a Sunday morning service, your goal is to leave there, refreshed and feel like you connected and get a chance to, be in God's presence and, ask for forgiveness and all, walk out of there with a little bit of peace in your life through that connection to God's presence during church services. I think those have been two real big takeaways I've had. And those are hard. Like usually you don't want to talk to people or have people in your business. And sometimes when you're in those dark places, you don't feel like being around a bunch of people, but those are two things that I would say can be very helpful in dealing with these times when you're struggling.
Absolutely. I think that sometimes many people have a tendency to isolate when they're walking through a hard time, which is actually like the opposite of what we need to do. Because like you said, it's so helpful to actually put words to your feelings, to actually talk through it, and just to get into those atmospheres of life. And that is it's tremendously helpful. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. I really appreciate you getting on here and just being so just honest, so honest with what you've walked through and what you're walking through. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to share and hopefully encourage other people and let people know that it's okay to struggle. Like no one's expected to be awesome and perfect their whole life. That people are going to go through hard times. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to go through hard times because of something that they did to cause the hard time. But it's still possible to try to find that peace and lean on God and others around you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of our podcast, and our deepest gratitude goes out to our guests for sharing their incredible journey with us. If you're drawn to stories of deliverance, miracles, redemption, and testimonies, then we invite you to be a part of our show here at Clay Podcast. Your story could touch hearts and ignite hope. Join us in spreading faith and inspiration by completing the guest application on our website, www.claypodcastnetwork.com. And as always, a huge thank you for listening. Your support means the world to us. God bless.
We don't need a man.